Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. This is a really exciting Scrum Pulse because it's not just me talking. In fact, we're very fortunate to have a great other person talking, which I'll introduce in a moment. But before I do that, I'd like to start with some housekeeping because, of course, you have to have some housekeeping first. Your microphones were muted throughout. We don't want to hear your dog or your, getting on a bus or whatever you're doing whilst watching this live webinar. However, you still have the opportunity to ask questions. You'll notice there's a little box you can see here. There's a nice little cutout graphic where you can type in a question and then maybe we'll answer it. I don't know. I can't promise. We've got a lot of content to cover today. However, if they're really cool questions, I know that I always spend some time reviewing them afterwards. So if there's some cool questions, maybe we'll let you know or put them on the website if we don't get around to covering them today. Sort of technical questions like, hey, is this going to be available afterwards? Can I get access to the slides? Hopefully one of my colleagues will answer. So don't worry, we'll get those addressed. If you've got any technical problems, feel free to type them in and one of our colleagues, somebody far more capable and able than I, will be able to answer that. So that's housekeeping. We're going to try to keep to the time box. As I said, a lot of content, so very excited to talk about this. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Dave West. I run Scrum.org. I'm the product owner and CEO of Scrum.org here in sunny Burlington, Massachusetts. It's actually in the office where the first ever Scrum project happened over 25 years ago. Actually, not in this office. It was downstairs in the basement because they didn't trust these software developers with a nice airy place. They put them in the basement, but which is really exciting to be talking to you from here. But I'd like to introduce Wouter, who is a partner and global leader of Agile at McKinsey, who I've been working on and Scrum.org's been working with on this study. Wouter, do you want to say hello to the audience?
Yes, hello. Delighted to be joining you here from Amsterdam. So my name is Wouter Aghina, and I have a background in engineering, and have been doing lots of work. First in engineering, actually, with in automotive industry, and then with McKinsey, actually on product development and lean product development, and then later phasing into agile and looking also at the moment much more broadly at how can we apply agile values and agile principles and agile organization throughout companies, and as that in that role, I am actually have that leadership role in the organization practice of McKinsey.
Yeah, it's been really interesting working with Wouter and the rest of McKinsey, or a small group in McKinsey. Obviously, you couldn't work the whole of it; that would be very difficult. But the on this agile, on the agile story and their experiences of agile, and they complement very strongly the story that we at Scrum.org have been working on, though they come at it from a very different perspective. So it's great to have Wouter. I think you'll find that between us, maybe we'll make some sense over the next hour. We will see. Thanks for joining us, Wouter. So where do we begin? Well, I guess before we go into the research and the stuff that we've been doing, I think perhaps the place to begin is, why did Scrum.org and McKinsey start to collaborate? But before we actually talk about that, maybe you want to hear about, because not all of you know who Scrum.org is and who McKinsey is and what we're doing in the agile space. So maybe we should talk a little bit about that. I'll start, and then Wouter will talk a little bit about McKinsey. So we're the home of Scrum, Scrum.org, founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. Actually, I was with him this morning having coffee and donuts. Always take donuts, and we were talking a lot about the future of Scrum and the like. So Scrum is basically three things. Scrum.org does three things. We obviously have training. We train about 3,000-4,000 people a month with our professional Scrum trainers, consistent training around the world. Certification, obviously, we've we're empirical, so we believe in validated learning where you test the knowledge and your understanding. And we maintain a community of the professional Scrum trainers, these 250 trainers that are throughout the world delivering it, and then the training organizations they're at. And then obviously we maintain the sort of like the body of knowledge around Scrum. But interestingly, our mission isn't around Scrum, it's about improving the profession, meaning applying the ideas of empiricism, self-organization, and continuous improvement to this broader sort of problem of complex work, on complex product work in particular. So we're really interested in the application of that, and we believe that Scrum at the basis and lots of other things help you do that in a complex world, which lends itself very nicely and provides a lot in common with the work that McKinsey have been doing as they drag kicking and screaming some of their clients into this agile work. But I can't talk about that. So Wouter, would you like to share a little bit the McKinsey story around agility?
Yeah, so I guess most of you will know McKinsey and Company as a quite a well-known institution, but I think why and what is McKinsey now doing on agility? And I think we come back a little bit on the why later, Dave. So I'll focus here on what we, as a group within McKinsey, which is the Agile Tribe, which is a combination of people from our digital practice, from our organization practice, from our operations practice, are all jointly doing. And that is actually to help our clients to take the Agile principles and the Agile values and use them to build a much more effective operating model at scale. Well, so sometimes starting or maybe often starting in the digital / software / product development domain, but then actually taking it across the whole enterprise, right? And on this page, you see over the past 5-6 years, we have had a lot of experience working with that with clients, and we have found basically there's two major steps to take, which is really build this aspiration and the belief and pilot and learn and do some design work around this. And then the second phase comes, which is about scaling and improving. I think we are getting more and more active with clients on the right side of this. And that's also where we got really into contact with Scrum.org, because then you need these capabilities, agile coaches, scrum masters, etc., at a scale which is very high, and you need to start thinking about what type of people do I need, and that's also where our first research started. So that's that's where we started to meet up and where we are really teaming up in a partnership to help companies throughout the world, right, to scale this and to build, I would say, better organizations where people deliver more value and have a better life doing it, actually.
Yeah, happiness. What's interesting is obviously McKinsey approach agility very much from this organizational change, working with some of the biggest clients in the world, right? And obviously Scrum.org, we've been very focused on helping teams and very focused on, coaching and Scrum mastery and product ownership and the like. And it's great to have that diversity of opinion. I mean, that's true of an agile team as well. Having these different perspectives has really opened, I hope, both our minds, certainly my mind, as to the future of how society is going to function, how teams and organizations are going to function, how we're going to deliver amazing products for our kids and our grandkids and the like. But what's interesting, though, is that when we started working together and started talking, and we do like to talk, as you'll appreciate on this call, we found that there was lots of things we could have done together, and we're like, okay, what should we? Well, the proof is always deliver something. Ken, the creator of Scrum, is always sort of the reason why we have this concept of an increment is you need to deliver something. You need to prove how you work. Thinking is great, but until you deliver something. And we found there was a continuous problem or a recurring theme to the discussions, and it was around people. And the challenge that people have, and a fundamental question that was posed, and I think it was Wouter or one of the team, maybe Christopher or Jasper, other members of this small little team that were working together, said, can everyone be agile? And what does that mean? What does an agile persona, agile person? Are some people more able to be agile? Are we talking about a fundamental change to how people are even who works in the team, how we reward, how we think about, what does it mean to be agile? So that started the research that we worked on together, and hopefully you'll see some of that in a minute. Wouter, as we were talking about this, what people are right for agile, I mean, it is a fundamental question, right?
Yeah, it is a fundamental question, and I think it is a question that obviously becomes very important also for senior leaders, because when they embark on this journey, they have a big responsibility towards their people, and that have invested large parts of their lives into a company. And now, if we make this transformation, can they take the people along or not? Right, that is really on their mind, and what should be their role, right? And we might get back to that as well, right? That I think partly this is about personality traits, but partly it is also about what context do leaders create, right? And which of the personality traits that are in all of us, right, are therefore promoted to come out and be developed and grown, and which are not, right? And I think this is a discussion that is super relevant for many companies at the moment, right?
Yeah. I think what's interesting, and you've said this a lot. We've done, when we released this study, we did a number of press interviews and talking to geezers about it. And what we found was something that Wouter said that resonated with me, and is that building the right environment is to allow these personality traits to grow and to be manifest in organizations where historically we've maybe concentrated on some other things. So I'm really interested about that, and hopefully we'll share some of that. So why is this so important? So let's begin at the beginning, because that's a very good place to begin. What's interesting is that, and there's a really good piece, Wouter, that you were involved in that McKinsey published, and it was, as we started the discussions, you sent it to me, and then I finally read it, which of course took me ages to. It was quite long, by the way, but 5 trademarks.
Lots of numbers in it, I'm afraid.
Lots of numbers. That's working with McKinsey. There's always lots of numbers. Anyway, very good, sensible numbers. The 5 trademarks of an agile organization, and this is a sort of a symbolic sort of representation of perhaps some of the ideas that came from that, from machines to organisms, from factories to living ecosystems. Sort of like, this is the agility is about the ability to respond to the new age, the modern age, dare I say the digital age. And so the part of why this is so important is that we're changing the paradigm of work because of complexity. So that's what I read from the 5 trademarks. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if I go back to actually like a little personal anecdote, right? I think 4 years ago or so, I took over in McKinsey the role for organization or operating model design. And I guess one of the facts that we found there that really reflects, I think, this shift and this move to more complexity is that the pace or the frequency at which companies were doing large and complex reorganizations has increased over the last 20 years tremendously, right? And it has gone up to almost doing a big reorganization every two years, 3 years, yeah, and taking about 1.5 years for it, and often failing at it, right? So that for us was also a reason to say, hey, what are we doing with our clients? What type of organizations are we actually developing and changing? And is this managerial hierarchy, right? It seems to get outdated, right? And very quickly, and too rigid, and not adaptive enough, and not dynamic enough to be able to do work in a world that is so much more complex, right? So that's one lens. Another lens would be to look at engagement, right? And the amount of frustration that people in companies nowadays have because the operating model, the processes, the procedures, the rules, the reporting lines, the escalations, all of that is working against doing what they know would be doing the right thing for the customer and the company. So I think we are right with this community within McKinsey strong believers that we are in an era where this whole notion of the managerial hierarchy as a dominating organizational paradigm will be replaced by something better.
Which brings me very much to the next slide. I was trying to do that surreptitiously and then realized my mouse was somewhere else. But which really brings me to this is inspired by an economist called Khalida Perez. She's a Venezuelan in the United Kingdom. She writes about the sort of like the technology innovation and the ages that are associated with, industrial revolution, the movement to steel, And this is inspired by some of her work, and it sort of inspired some of the stuff we're doing because we're moving. I think what you said, Wouter, is spot on. They have to create new factories. So the reason why there's every 18 months you're doing a reorg is because you're creating new factories based on a new market, which is changing rapidly. So you're trying to change this mass production model or this factory model, to use that analogy, to support this new market or this new opportunity or this situation. And so you're continuously in this process. Whereas we need to build a very different model. And these are just some of the characteristics of that. I particularly like what you said about management. The traditional age of mass production is management is king. What we're talking about now is really the creator is king, working in these cross-functional teams, right?
Yeah, and then of course the role of leaders and management changes and becomes much more enabling. And anyway, I think we have to be careful not to go on a long discussion of that. Not per se less challenging, right? And not per se less needed, and not per se less, I would say, more rich actually in content, right? And so you need less managers that manage processes and more managers that actually know, I don't know, product, right? Or know customers or know, and then have to bring more content, and with that can help to set a better direction, define the work better, and enable teams to have a clear purpose and deliver.
Exactly. And at the heart of that, though, is this fundamental question around people, right? It is interesting that 65% of kids starting school today will not hold jobs that have been created yet. 85% of the jobs in 2030 they don't exist today. So I think these are crazy numbers, and I don't know if they're just like clickbait type numbers, and maybe they are to some extent. But I look at my children, and I got a 6-year-old and how old are they? Gosh, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. Like there's only two, though it feels like there's like 15 most of the time. And I'm like, what the heck are they going to be doing? What skills do they need? How the heck? Are they going to be typing even, or is it all going to be voice? Are they going to be? I mean, what are they going to be? Are they going to be manufacturing? Will it be these big, like, I don't know. So it's an interesting world that we need to think about.
I guess that one thing that is clear though, right, and that's also on this page and related to our discussion strongly, is that work that is repetitive, right, and not complex, that is very likely, right, to be automated and replaced by algorithms, etc., very quickly. So that does mean, right, that they will have to be more, that our children will have to be, on average, much more in creative and complex type of work.
Exactly. And I worry greatly about this, and it sort of inspired when we start talking about this sort of change in our beliefs. And I think this diagram, this slide that you put in the deck is awesome, because it talks about how we move from the traditional model to the abundance model. The world is full of opportunities, but not everything is an opportunity. And I think that is sort of like at the heart of this this different way of thinking about work and different set of personal characteristics.
Yes, yes, and so I think, I mean, this is one element, right, of the, I guess, the traditional belief system that is underlying many managerial hierarchies, right? Is this model of scarcity, of control, of how to say, right, holding on. And I'm in the middle of this as a client where I'm working, where the tradition is really to have all your own IP, to have it all closed, to have it right, and they need to shift now and to a new new, let's say, area, new and it needs to all change, right? To be successful in that new space, they will need to open up, they will need to share, they will need to partner as equals, right? Not with suppliers. They will need to, and they will need to shift much more. Also, then this mindset of scarcity needs to shift to much more an abundance and a win-win type of mindset. So that is a quite paramount shift, right? Which is not only, how to say, in the minds, but as we discussed before, it also is in the whole operating model.
Yeah.
Right? If you have annual budgeting negotiations for 6 months internally already, how do you expect your leaders that do that to go out and within weeks actually strike a deal with a partner so that you can move on, right? And can deliver value to the customer, as opposed to spending 6 months or a year or longer with lawyers to nail down the whole contract. And so this is quite it's why I love my job. It's not easy, but it is fun.
It is so hard. Yeah, I mean, we are, as I say, going through this transition stage. It might be easier when everybody realizes we're in the world of abundance, but we're in this sort of like, and yes, it's easy to get bogged down talking about access to capital and, the markets and etc. and how that influences the behavior of our companies and our governments and the like. It's a very challenging time, which brings us nicely to the, considering all that context, this brings us to what we did. So ultimately, we were interested in this fundamental question: is everybody right for agility? Right? And
Yeah.
because we were really concerned that this abundance, move from scarcity, move to the digital age, the creator versus manager, so we're like, hang on, this sounds like a massive change. Is this going to be like 10% of the population that can do it? Or, if I've got an organization of 200,000 people, am I going to have to fire half of them? What the heck is the future? So that's the question that we asked. And so we started this by working with, a broad set of consultants and professional Scrum trainers who were working with these clients to find out the traits, the characteristics that they were interested in. And we did a number of different exercises with them. And ultimately, we found these 3 things sort of like drove everything that they said, ambiguity, outcome, and team. Those 3 things were sort of really, really important to this change, to the behaviors and the characteristics of the people. And yes, there's other things, and there's lots of other things that have to be important, and open-mindedness and but ultimately, when we just picked 3, these were the sort of highest profile kind of characteristics or traits that we found. I mean, is that consistent with what you see over and over again, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, our findings, I think, were quite consistent with what we see. Yeah, I think at the same time, um, um, and we'll get back to that later, right? I think it is important to see that these are here portrayed as personality traits, but that they are largely also driven.
Yes.
At least if I look at myself, even if I work at different clients, my ability to handle ambiguity in one context is different from the ability to handle ambiguity in the other. Right? And why is that the case? Because in this one client, when I walk in I have this little voice in the background that says to me, okay, tomorrow you will see Mr. X, right? And if you don't know all the answers to all his questions, he might actually say that he doesn't need you any longer, right? So then my tolerance for ambiguity and the tolerance that I have for having some ambiguity in the teams that I'm working with, it's much more challenging, let's put it that way, for me to live with that than in a context where there is a different type of behavior by those people that I need support and help from.
Yeah, it's interesting. Context is everything in these characteristics. And that's the reason why we started. So we started with these three and we're like, hang on a minute. What does that mean though? Let's concentrate on looking at two sort of models of behavior, for want of a better term. And we looked at personality traits and work values. So taking these three things, we said, okay, so what does it mean? What are the important personality traits and work values to be able to handle these ideas, and what I guess, the ability to handle ambiguity, what kind of personality traits and work values best support that. But I'd like to actually stop for a minute, Wouter. This is, by the way, this was the encouragement, because as you can hear, I like to talk. Wouter was like, hang on, I think actually maybe we should ask our audience to think for a second. So Lindsay, one of my very esteemed colleagues, we have a little poll that we'd like to execute with you guys, because we asked this question broadly of our community to see which ones were the important personality traits. This is a personality trait model. You may have heard of it as the big five, etc. We've kind of modified it slightly around ability to handle ambiguity, agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness, and openness. You can see some of the words around this. We'd like to run a quick poll now with you guys to see what you think is the important characteristics or traits for agile enterprises. Lindsay, could you just execute that poll, please? Don't look behind the curtain. I don't know. Can we do that, Lindsay? We're going to say maybe. Are we doing it? Oh,
I see it, Dave.
Oh, you see, I don't see it because I'm presenting. Let me.
So we have 38% on handles ambiguity. We have 3% on agreeableness. We have 2% on extroversion. We have 9% on, bear with my Dutch English,
conscientiousness.
And we have 48% on openness. So very interesting.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Ambiguity and openness are coming out as the winners, as the most important.
Well, that's very interesting, because that's not actually consistent with our actual findings. So let's actually now explore. Am I presenting again?
You're presenting again. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just checking. You see, that's the reason why there's two of us. Otherwise, we'd have been a disaster on one. So let's have a look at what this was a relatively small sample, but we interviewed a bunch of people that were involved in this and got some data here that we're sharing with you. Now, ambiguity seems to be the number one characteristic, but interestingly, number two is agreeableness. Now, obviously, a poll on a webinar, you don't look at all the words, there isn't all the details, so maybe some of that is the thing. Extroversion is less important for certain roles, particularly around team members, than product ownership, and then conscientiousness, etc. But openness isn't as important, which is interesting. The other thing that's important to highlight here is we were talking to Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, those people. So we concentrated only on two roles: membership of a team, so a team member type role, and product owners, like that business leader. Those two primary roles. Yes, there's also other roles involved. We concentrated on those two primary roles just to see if there's any differences around this. So Wouter, what do you think? We saw what the audience said. What do you think? And then you've got our data here. What's your biggest sort of takeaways?
Yeah, well, one takeaway I think is that as you said, right, this could be partially driven by the wording, etc. So I think one of the things that I understand really from our research, and that really resonates well with what I see in happening in reality, is this agreeableness. This is not a soft type of agreeableness, right? That we quote for. But this is the fact that you have an opinion, but you also listen to opinions of others. And the way I often depict it is like that you do a Lego game, right? And you have blocks, and you put things on, and other people put things on, and maybe they take some things of you off the building, right? And use some of them, and you build it again. And some of I mean, I have one high-tech client where they're extremely strong in this, right? They are all focused on the outcome, on building the right solution, and not on whose idea is in or out, and so this is how I understand this agreeableness. And I think in a very quick poll like we just did it might be interpreted slightly differently. But I think if you have that type of understanding, I am a strong believer in this outcome, right? That if you combine this ability to deal with ambiguity with this behavior of, bringing ideas, but also listening to ideas and being able to build on ideas and share, I think that is obviously, feels very logical, right? As a strong um, strong outcome. Then the other thing I think that we did not discuss, but is this neuroticism, right? So all more the fear-driven type of behavior, controlling, being self-oriented, all of that.
Yeah.
Is I think, but maybe here our participants, when they saw openness, they actually were thinking of the things that I was just talking about.
Yeah. I mean,
Whereas openness in these traits, I think, is more about that you're very open about yourself, right? Which is not per se important, I think.
yeah. Well, I mean, introspective, curious, original, imaginative, insightful. Obviously, we're not saying those characteristics aren't important, but ultimately, and obviously, a great team has many of those characteristics, but they're not as important. This is relative, remember, as important as agreeableness, ability to handle ambiguity. Conscientiousness was interesting as well, because what we found about conscientiousness was that the teams need to be more, they need to care more about, delivering a great product. They need to be caring, they need to create a caring environment, and they need to care about, they need to have understand the consequences of their actions. Product owners, business people tend to, I guess, they have to be more entrepreneurial and more risk oriented by their very nature, which is always interesting and challenging. So it's sort of like that there's a relative sort of difference there. And neuroticism is exactly what you said, Wouter. It's interesting because only the paranoid survive, they say often, and what we're saying, actually, no. Actually, that's not true. Insecure paranoia may drive the wrong behaviors. That kind of set of personality traits, though obviously everybody may have them, they bring whatever they bring, but ultimately we shouldn't reward and encourage that hero kind of orientation. Isn't that sort of like, I'm going to get this done, don't worry. That kind of behavior is definitely something we shouldn't reward. It's interesting though, I think the other thing is about ambiguity, and I know you spoke a lot about this, but I just want to highlight something that's really, really interesting. Is it's actually so much more important than we think. So important that it's not just us saying this. This Aristotle, Archimedes, this huge project that Google did, that really focused on what made high performance teams and the perfect team. This is the New York Times view of it from their website, but it sort of emphasized that as well, building a psychological safe environment, creating an environment where it was yes and, not yes but. How many times, ladies and gentlemen, how many times, Wouter, have you done this? When somebody comes up, says something that you don't totally agree with, like me, instead of saying, yeah, that's really interesting, I'm not going to dish you because I don't totally understand where you're coming from, but maybe we could do this, and you sort of create that kind of like safe environment for me to share things, even if they are stupid, it's hard, right?
Yeah, of course, this is hard, right? Of course, and it's
Exactly.
even, I mean, it's hard to keep listening, right? If on the first instance you disagree. I guess that the human condition is to, when you disagree, you start thinking about how you can steer it the other direction, right? And get it where you want it.
Exactly, and they teach you quite a lot. There's this Norwegian that there's this sort of Norwegian thing that I read recently about how they negotiate peace treaties. It's from Norway, and like the Lebanon and the Middle East, etc. Obviously, not particularly successfully at the moment, but that's another point. But the point is that this ability to listen is really, really, I'm awful at it, as you can probably tell. But my grandmother used to say to me, Royder, she used to say, you've got two ears, one mouth, use them in that number. And I was like, oh, of course she would then talk for the next hour. But the point is that listening, being supportive, etc., is very, very, very important. Yes, and not yes, but. I think agreeableness, a surprising secret sauce. So, okay, so that's personality traits, which I think, very interesting, etc. We also asked some questions in this study around work values, right? And there we asked a few, a few more than these five, and we'll come to that in a second. I'd love to get the audience's perspective on this. And I apologize if we're making you do work. That's the last thing you wanted to do. You're probably eating your lunch or having a coffee or eating a Snickers bar or something. And so I apologize if you were forcing you to do that. But I'd love to see, and it worked before. I was surprised. So Lindsay, maybe we should bring up the poll. So we're asking you to relative importance of these work, well, the importance. Which ones you think are the most important characteristic around work values? Pride in product, openness to change, customer centricity, self transcendence, which is basically about concern and welfare for others, etc. Self-enhancement, the pursuit of one's own desires. And what I'm going to have to ask you again, because I can't see it because I'm presenting, if you can see any of the results. Did you see any of those results? It was fleeting.
So we have pride in product 14%, openness to change 39%, customer centric 38%, self transcendence 6%, and self enhancement 3%.
That's interesting. Which is, and I assume, am I presenting again? Just make sure. Oh,
Yes, you are.
bear with me. Okay, cool. So let's hang on. Oh, there we go. It worked. That was a surprise. My Mac was just having a little bit of a meltdown there. But that's interesting because this is obviously the study, and what we found. It's pretty consistent with what the audience said, which is not a surprise. There was a few interesting things around this is the difference between a product owner and a team member. I think what we found was that that particularly there's a sort of difference around openness for change. There's a difference around pride in product. Well, the pride in product is pretty much the same, but the customer centricity and the openness to change is a little different in terms of relative importance. And that's probably consistent with what we see in what is important. Remember that a product owner or a business person in this new age of the customer, right? You're worrying about the customer there, whether that be an internal or external customer, but delivering value to that customer. That's your focus, as opposed to sort of like a team that happens to be changing their Lego all the time in pursuit of that customer's desires. Anything to add to that? What do you think?
Yeah, no. So I guess that the one thing that we added here to this chart that we didn't ask the respondents, but is this value of conservation.
Yeah.
And I think it really links back quite well to our earlier discussion, right? That this controlling, keeping the things the way they are, etc. I mean, it's to some extent the opposite of openness to change. Is really something you don't want to stimulate, right? And we get back to what we said before, that if you want these values to prosper and you don't want to boost the conservation type of value, I think these values often link to primary needs of people. And so we get back to this psychological safety, right? This feeling of belonging, right? And not having too much fear in the place. Because if there's a lot of fear, then you are really stimulating this conservation. You are stimulating the self-enhancement part quite quickly. So I think that is one additional finding, which I find it very important for leaders.
I think it's really interesting. It just reminded me, I hadn't thought of it before. So we have a professional Scrum trainer called Dave Dame, who's paraplegic. He's got cerebral palsy, and he is in a wheelchair, etc. And he does this talk around agility and how it relates to his condition and in his physical challenges. And he talks about getting outside your comfort zone. And he talks about this, this sort of change is inevitable. You need to. It'd be very easy for him to stay in his home, right? Where he's got all of his stuff. And he goes, but ultimately, the value that I can deliver to myself and to society, if I'm just staying inside, it's not going to help. So he talked a lot about the challenges and the fact that he spends a lot of time with leaders using his physical condition to highlight the fact that what the hell are they so scared of? They don't have to have somebody they don't know see them naked every day. They don't have to, which is probably not. I'm sharing it's on his TED talk. I'm not sharing anything he wouldn't share. But ultimately, that sort of desire of outside your comfort zone. And there's a big. It's crucial, I think, Wouter. What you're saying is you have to willing to break things, willing to try things, because ultimately the world that we live in is a series of questions that need to be answered, not a series of efficiencies that we need to, we don't live in a world of scarcity, to use that expression.
I think the one other thing that we haven't touched upon yet, which I find so very important, is if I look right from the work that I've been doing for the last couple of years in terms of structuring organizations, right? And how do you divide organizations? I don't know, in tribes and squads or whatever type of model you choose, right? That's actually a very important rule, very important thing to do in order to create clear ownership of something, right? Create clear ownership, create this is essential, create a clear purpose and a, I don't know, product, right, of for each team, for each tribe, so that you can instill this value of pride.
Yeah.
But, somehow, right, in the if you apply the paradigm of managerial hierarchies, where you cut up things usually in functions, what you end up with is that people are no longer understanding how the piece of work that they are doing is contributing to a product, right, or to something that creates value to the customer. And so you can end up finding people in organizations that make great products, create great value, right? But lots of people don't have the pride anymore, right? And they don't have the understanding anymore. There's also not sufficient investment in helping people to understand the context that they work in, right? There is this reductionist mindset of, I, as a leader, I will divvy up the work and I'll give you instructions. And if you have those instructions, you just have to execute it, right? If I make it very black and white. And therefore, it's inefficient for you to sit in big meetings where you have no role or to, right, or whatever, or to, right? You should just focus on doing your own work and, right, and be productive, right? And all of that is actually really detrimental to this pride.
It's interesting because unfortunately, if you're in a process-oriented world where you're focused on a function, you can have pride in it, you can do that well, but unfortunately, there's no guarantee that you having pride in that has a relevant has delivers value because
Yeah.
because they're so decoupled. Whereas ultimately, if you can align what you're proud of with the value that that
Oh,
thing is creating, then
yeah.
ultimately you get what's this autonomy, mastery, purpose, right? You get this sort of like purpose delivered value sort of to this, and you end up in a much stronger position. So the beauty of the model, the operating model that you and McKinsey have been driving, and obviously a number of our professional Scrum trainers are involved in those organizations as well, is you keep it as simple as possible. You align it to the customers and to the outcomes that you're seeking, and thus allow people to become proud of the value they're doing. And leadership's role is to create an environment that shows you why it's important. So as soon as you show them a why or give them a true north, then you create that sort of create that thing. Hence the reason why product ownership is such customer centricity of that product ownership, and being able to distill that vision and describe it to the team is so important.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. Oh, and I'm just like, now I was getting all deep there for a second, and let's avoid that. So yeah, basically just highlighting what we just said: pride in product, customer centricity, pride in product, open to change. Those two sets of characteristics. So let's quickly, and I know I've only got like, oh shit, oh dear, 10 more minutes. So let's talk a little bit about, the what are, when you're hiring or selecting, what we found. Now, if you look at the research, we spent a lot of time trying to give some practical. It's very, very important. We really tried not to just be, Wouter and Dave and the other people involved, Jesper and Abby, just waffling on in a document. We tried to provide some very tactical, hey, this is the questions that you should ask in an interview. And this is why it's important. These are the characteristics that we're looking for. So if you're looking at sort of hiring or getting people selecting people, you'll notice that motivation, support, customer pride are the sort of like the focus areas that we highlighted. The value of outcomes, the value of being part of a team and valuing others and supporting them in that pursuit. One interesting question around that support thing is, when did you help somebody last? Isn't that an interesting question? You're going to put people in teams in organizations, but how often do you think about how they help others and support others? Ultimately, what we rewarding people in the future, we're going to have very flat organizations maybe, and that means you're going to reward people not for necessarily how many people will work for them, but for how many people they help get better in their craft, right? If we live in the age of the creator. That's an interesting question. Customer interested, obviously we care very deeply around customers. Getting people to think in those shoes is important. And obviously the pride thing, which we just talked about at detail, finding out what people are proud of. It's possible that people one, have never really thought about this, but also I'm sure they have, but actually finding if what they're proud of aligns with the things that you think are important, or that your team thinks are important, and your organization thinks are important. And also the counter story, when would they be disappointed? What would disappoint them? The opposite to being proud of something. What's happened in their lives and in their previous experience that has disappointed them? Interesting. So these are some things that maybe you can focus on. Were there anything to sort of add to this?
Well, the one thing that I would add here is that obviously, if you go to our publication, right, then we give a lot more detail on how to really ask the question, assess it, etc. So I think, yeah, then it gets one level more practical. I don't think we have to touch upon that in this page, but I would really recommend to have a look at that.
Yeah, and obviously so would I. But obviously we're not saying that you shouldn't ask other things. We're not the mind police, which brings us very nicely, I think, to the fact that not everybody, you're not always in a situation where you can just hire people or move them in or whatever. Sometimes you've got people that are in. So one question that we asked, or a set of questions that we asked, were like, well, if people haven't got these characteristics, Is your team going to get relegated out of the Premier League? Are you just in trouble? Um, how can you change them? And coaching obviously becomes a key part to this. And so first thing that, we're not the mind police. It's we don't think that there's only one type of person, as that works in this world. And there's a product owner type person, there's a team, then these are templates, and you can just move for that. We're not conceited enough or arrogant enough to think that. We also believe that ultimately, if you start thinking about these things, you can start and being open to different ideas and maybe challenging how you think about the people's skills and people's behaviors and personality traits. Ultimately, we think that will ultimately change the behaviors that we expect. So we talked about coaching, as you can see here, and obviously I'm very conscious of time. We saw that actually most things could be coached. Some things are easier, and some things are harder. But ultimately, I think that everybody we spoke to thought that pretty much everything could be coached, and that if people haven't got these characteristics, there was a phrase that one of the interviews we got: you can fake it until you make it. By providing an environment, Wouter talks a lot about this, providing a leadership environment that encourages these behaviors of, agreeableness, ambiguity, not always asking for all the answers, accepting that people say, I don't know, I'll get back to you, creating that sort of environment is really, really important. And it allows people to, dare I say, fake. They may not have necessarily out of the box got those characteristics, but they can fake it until they make it, as we say in America or England or whoever we are. I don't know, Wouter, maybe that's not what you see, but I think you can, if you create the right environment, encourage these behaviors.
Well, a lot of these behaviors, right? Although I guess they at some point in our life come across as, how to say, things that are deeply ingrained in people, right? Also, having had an education as a personal life coach, I'm convinced that, yeah, of course, a lot of that is learned behavior. And as you say, when you can encourage people to take small steps and to behave in a different way, and they experience success, and they maybe experience that some of the fears that they had don't play out, people can learn new behaviors, right? And with that, complement their how to say, portfolio of behaviors that they can choose from. So with the right context, with the right coaching, and I guess also in some cases still you need to do some selection, because obviously, yes, you can provide context, you can provide coaching, but if there's no will of people to actually learn, right? I have been in the early days when I just had my coach training, I tried to coach everyone that I met. But if people don't want to be coached, they're not coachable, right? So I think the reality is often what we see is that it is a mix, right, of all of these things. And
Exactly.
therefore, it's development of leaders such that they create a new environment. It is changing also some of the more hardwired things. It is providing the right coaching, be it at the team level, be it at the somewhat more senior level, and all of that together, I think, is what in the end is needed if you want to make a shift on these things at a decent level of skill.
Exactly. It's interesting. I didn't know that, Wouter, you were a life coach. So I've learned something new, which is, even though I've been working with you for whatever, 6 months or whatever, or a year, I guess now, which is now I know why you make me change my behavior frequently. You need to put a sign saying, I'm dreadfully sorry, but I am a coach, which is worrying. So we're now coming up to I know we haven't had time for questions. I apologize. When Wouter and I get together, you're lucky we got past the first slide. So I think we've done better than every time we've run through this. I guess we just want to finish with, so what does it all mean? What does, I think what's important is that people, this new world, this world that we've been talking about, this move to digital world, creators, the sort of like abundance versus scarcity, all of that stuff means we have to start thinking a little bit about people differently. There was one question I did get a chance to read, which was about measurement and do you measure teams? And so there's two big things. One is you need to create an environment that doesn't negate all of this crazy stuff that we've been talking about around ambiguity, around agreeableness, and secondly, you must ensure that you mirror the behaviors that you seek in the individuals that you're working with. So those two things that I think are super important. But ultimately, at the heart of it, you have to believe that the world is changing. You have to think a little bit about the personality traits and work values that you seek in this changing world. You need to hire and select not for superheroes, not for the alphas, the paranoid, I'll do it on my own, but instead be focused on how people work in teams. I think the Google study highlighted that. I think all our findings highlight this. You can, by investing in coaching and by demonstrating the behaviors, encourage changes in the people around you. And when you are selecting people, think about what motivates them, think about what they expect from others, think about do they understand or care about the customer, and think of the work that they do and are proud of it. Wouter, we're sort of coming up to the end of the presentation.
I was triggered by you, and I was wondering should I say it or not, but I'll do it anyway.
In so 2 minutes, yes.
Yeah, this question that you got asked about measurement, I think it is actually quite fundamental, because we are looking for people that where you want to instill pride in product, and you want outcome versus process oriented, right? You want outcome oriented people. So outcome oriented people and people with pride in product, what I've seen now over and over with clients, for instance, that start like a digital factory or things like that, and they started, build it a bit in separation from the existing company, and then that whole thing gets bogged down by the rest of the company, and you cannot measure outcomes, and you don't see the products coming out quickly. Guess who the first people are that gonna leave?
Yeah, the people that care about those products.
The people that care about product and they want to see results. So I think thinking from the start, how do we make results possible and measurable, right? And how do we give teams constant feedback, right, on how they are doing, right, and what results they are producing. I think is a very important part of the context that people need to attract these kind of people, to retain them, and to develop people in this direction of being having this product pride and results orientation.
Yeah, and that's crucial. And we're coming up to our time box, so I think the sort of last sort of takeaways, and working in a complex world requires great teams. I'm going to read that to you, but inspirational product leaders, clear vision, focused on the customer and the outcomes that you seek, an environment for them to be success. You need to think a little bit about personality. You need to think about work values, and I'd point you obviously at the study. That's a bit.ly, so you can download it quickly and get access. Obviously, you can just go on the Scrum.org or the McKinsey site and type in some words that relate to this, and you'll probably find it. Maybe our names is probably the easiest way to find it. But and please do that. There's a lot more detail than we could possibly cover today. So final words, Wouter.
Well, thank you, Dave. It was a joy. Thank you all participants for being here and being hopefully passionate together with us on this topic and on the broader implications of it. And looking forward to more events like this in the future.
Yeah, I think passionate is so important. As you can see, we have pride in our product. We're also, though, not arrogant enough to believe we've got all the answers. However, what we do is we've got some good questions and maybe some ideas that we'd love to get your feedback on. Feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact details, etc., on the paper, etc. So this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm very mindful of our time box because I know that your time is very precious who are watching this, and you've got important stuff to do, maybe some products to deliver, maybe some agreeableness to be more agreeable with. So thank you everybody for your time, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.